you can kind of tell year on year that it's just been evolving and getting better and better. It's just really, really great. Even, even with the challenges that the world presents, that the community is still able to kind of time and time again every year kind of come back with stronger offering and stronger work that really empowers us and champions our stories.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jesse Williams from Director's Notes, and today we're joined by Diana Cipriano, one of the programmers at BFI Flare. Diana, welcome to Director's Notes.
Hello,
Um,
happy to be here.
if we could start with, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your role in programming Flare?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I started working in Flare in 2018, and I've been part of the program team since 2024. And before that, I kind of worked on more of a program operation, on the kind of program planning side of things, kind of more uh, yeah, just shifting, more scheduling oriented, more kind of taking care of all of the negotiations in the background. But yeah, and I've been part of the program team since 2024. So this is my third year in the program team.
Incredible. And could you tell us a bit more about BFI Flare and what makes it stand out from other festivals?
Well, I mean, it's our 40th anniversary this year, and we've been a festival that's been constantly kind of evolving and adapting to kind of as the landscape has evolved, we've tried to kind of evolve with it. The festival started in 1986 under a very different name called kind of Gaze on Pictures. And then very quickly, in 2 years later, in 1988, it began to be kind of a proper festival called the London Lesbian and Gay Film Festival. And then in 2020, in 2014, it took on the kind of the name, the Flare, the kind of the name that still has to this day, BFI Flare. And even within the kind of the BFI Flare umbrella, we've kind of sort of evolved. First it was LGBT, until 2018, then LGBTQ plus, then LGBTQIA, LGBTIQ plus, and then LGBTQIA. So we've kind of, as the community has evolved, and as different as we've tried, as the community has moved towards more inclusivity, that we've made an effort to make sure that we are where our community is, and kind of be as inclusive as we can. And yeah, every year we're a non-competitive festival. We're kind of more of a celebration of the best of the of LGBTQI plus offering that happens throughout the world in any given year. So we kind of, yeah, we just have three thematic strands: hearts, bodies, and minds. And we have both features and shorts. And yeah, and this year, because it's our 40th anniversary, we also have kind of a sidebar with a group of archive titles, kind of treasures, hidden treasures, and treasures from our first edition. Just we all, every year we sort of have always a few archive titles, but this year, because it's such special anniversary for us, we kind of have given more of a spotlight to those films in the selection.
You mentioned the three strands, hearts, bodies, and minds. I just wondered what the significance is to that and the kind of relationship between those strands and queer cinema and why you've sorted them into those three.
Well, I mean, hearts is because hearts is, when you think about queer cinema, there's so much of it that, so much about coming of age, first love, stories of love, because at the end of the day, that was something that is very specific to our experiences, our the way we love. That's what kind of who we love, and how we experience love is one of the things that makes most groups in the community kind of stand out. So yeah, Hearts is kind of about love and about and doesn't mean that it's only um um carnal or or passionate love. It's all kinds of loves of love and of that expression of emotion. And then Bodies is stories of desire, um stories of desire and kind of and of identity, yeah, more of around identity, changing identities, desire. That's what we kind of thought about with Bodies. And then and Minds is more kind of politically and historical. It's it's the strand where for example, this year we have a documentary of Barbara Forever, which is a documentary on Barbara Hammer. So it's where we kind of trace these more historical and politically involved films. Yeah, so we kind of tried to these trends have been going on since, I believe, since Flare became Flare, so in 2014. And that was the kind of division that we thought we could group together and have within the scope all breadths of stories that are told within the LGBTQI plus community. And of course, sometimes it's interesting because there's quite overlap when we're making programming decisions. When we're meeting, there's quite film that could kind of go into one spot, and then or that it would feel like a very easy kind of that would slide into one place, but into one strand. But then we're like, oh, but maybe it would be interesting because there's another aspect of this film that maybe people that is not as evident, but it's quite important. So we might want to kind of highlight it. So that's how we've kind of utilized these three strands.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, Now you mentioned that it's the 40th anniversary. Amazing. Congratulations. I was just wondering the relationship between queer film and the festival. Queer film's come a long way since 40 years ago. I just wondered how it's evolved throughout those 40 years.
I mean, in the offering, because there's thankfully much more film, queer and trans and LGBTQI plus film being made. The the kind of the 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 base level of the work is actually in general higher. It's there's a higher level of production. There's the you can tell there's been like a positive change in how much and how good the work is, and also in the breadth of stories that are told. We've gone to cut from kind of like a binary, a mostly binary or kind of tree, types, like three, four types of stories to kind of all of these different scopes of stories and of characters and of um intersectionality that we are we have that is available to us as programmers. So it's been quite interesting to see this kind of evolution of films and making kind of our work harder, because it's where there's more and more every year an embarrassment of riches, where we're not kind of like, oh, we're struggling, or you know uh, you know but maybe in pre in like in before, in many years back, maybe there was an over reliance on documentary form, or for certain kinds of stories, because there was no production budget, or there were no production companies taking the risk, or like having the guts to kind of tell these stories. Whereas now we see more and more of these voices being championed, and we see the different stories being championed, and not in a way that we hadn't before. So it's been very encouraging to even in the in the years that I was kind of working alongside the programmers, and in the years that I've been a programmer, I have seen that shift. So you know then thinking back to what it must have been like before I joined, you can kind of tell year on year that it's just been evolving and getting better and better. It's just really really great. Even, even with the challenges that the world presents, that the community is still able to kind of time and time again every year kind of come back with stronger offering and stronger work that really empowers us and champions our stories.
With such a large quantity of amazing stories and diverse stories, what are the things you're looking for as you sift through so many submissions?
We look for, apart from works from all over the world, from as many countries as as we can, and especially championing from areas that it might not be just Europe. We try to kind of include every continent, every culture, every breadth of the human experience within our program, and also to ensure some intersectionality, in terms of race, of life experience, of cultural backgrounds. It's something that is quite important to us, and then also stories that just feel rooted in reality, or if not rooted in ludicrousy, but that there is a truth to them, a truth to that, even if it's in a fantasy land, there's some truth in the core of the story. So that is the kind of work that we look for, and then we also try to have a kind of a balance in terms of ages that we represent, in terms, because obviously different ages have different different ages of stories, different have different challenges. We try to have the biggest, the widest experience of the human and the queer and the LGBTQIA plus experience represented on screen. So because we, as first and foremost, we are a festival that we really want to represent our community and all that in all of the corners of it. So yeah, that's what we kind of try to look for, apart from quality and the basic quality that for to a film.
Of course. I understand Flare champions independent queer voices over more mainstream representation. Could you speak a bit further on this? And I just wondered if there's any challenges this brings to the festival?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've had even thinking back to last year, we did have a big title, in our opening night gala with the wedding banquet. So we've recently have been fortunate to kind of have, and actually we've been recent and fortunate only because, going back to what I was saying, the the these stories have been more and more embraced by bigger production companies, by studios. But the challenge that this presents is, sometimes a film is the kind of balance between audience, what we want to serve our audiences, but also understanding the value that is in a story. But if is this a very small story that only that has some limited, so it's always the kind of balance of audience appeal and how what does this bring to the film. And then also, as especially as the program starts being built into life, and we start having like titles stacked up to against each other, we try to understand where does the value of each film come from, what how does that connect with the rest of the films in the program. But then I think that the challenge in championing sometimes more championing independent voices is us making sure that we are also serving something to our audience that will resonate with them, and that they will um identify with, and go be pulled by, as much as they would be to a film that is more on the mainstream side, or kind of easier to kind of um see it and think, oh, I want to go see this. it's our also our role, a part of our role as programmers is also kind of making sure that in the copy of a film, in the in the kind of material that we have, the value of that film is well showcased in how we communicate that film to our audience. So I think those are the challenges: is how do we communicate this film to our audience in a way that it showcases all that the film has and all of the value that the film has. So, they will want to come and part with their money to and sit there for an hour and a half plus to watch it.
Of course, yeah, that makes total sense. Now, the festival's opening with Hunky Jesus and closing with Blackburn's Fast. What do you look for in an opening and closing film as you're sifting through all these submissions? What makes them stand out as the one that's going to start the festival off and the one that's going to close it out?
It kind of shifts from year to year. When thinking about, because there are years where something like a wedding banquet comes along and you're like, evidently this is a big title, that it's going to be a crowd pleaser, that it gets people, because we every at opening and closing we have a party afterwards, so it's like a film that we also want to audiences to kind of get something, a pep in their step of the film. But and then something like Hunky Jesus, it's something that celebrates a community that has an event that kind of has spent so many years and that continuously fights bigotry, continuously fights homophobia. So it felt like a quite an easy choice to kind of celebrate the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence as a community that also has a UK chapter. So it felt like the communal sense that we want to bring to the festival as like a celebration of in a safe space for the community. It really felt like it did that. And then also when thinking of something like Blackburn's Fast, another thing that we always want is to have films that, aside from their content as films, is always great to have something that's new and that, or that comes from a festival that has, something like Blackburn's Fast, which will premiere in Durban in July, but that's having kind of the international premiere in Berlin, and that is a kind of a very sweet, a sweet young story of love. It's something that it's accessible to audiences. Is quite a story that's very easy to identify for anyone watching, and that at the same time does have that excitement where people have potentially read about it, maybe when they saw the Berlin selection on any or kind of, yeah, to more informed audiences, they will have it in kind of their radar, and we tried to kind of have those kinds of films in the in those bigger slots, as we want to present stuff to audience that they're kind of looking forward to anyways. So yeah, those are kind of, and then yeah, with Blackburn's Fast, you also have, aside from it has a bit of that intersectionality that I was mentioning as well. So yeah, that's what we kind of looked for in those bigger slots.
They're two incredible choices to go with.
Yeah, we're really happy with both.
Now, I'd love to know a bit more about the programming team that selects these. What considerations go into building the panel, and who does the panel consist of?
So the panel is, we have it's me, my colleague Grace Barrett Plenty, who's a full-time programmer for both the London Film Festival and the BFI Flare. Then we have my colleague Darren Jones, who's a programmer, and he's also the production manager for the festival. And then we have Wema Mama, who's also who's kind of a programmer, an external programmer, but a programmer at the festival. And then also external programming colleagues are Zorian Clayton and Jay Hudson, who's also from T Girls on Film. And the kind of I think with this group of individuals, we are able to, and then we also have, you know, some people who kind of do pre-selection for us, either who've either have collaborated with us in previous festivals, or you know, that have kind of worked with us for a long time. So we kind of have that rapport, and it's really helpful when, you know, when getting through submissions. But and I think in this group of people, in the kind of Flare programming community, is quite, you know, we're quite varied, and we have very different, aside from, you know, some of us being trans women, well, me being a lesbian woman, we have a gay man, you know, we have queer women, we have a trans masc, trans femme programmers. So because we have all these different breadths of the community, we're able to kind of, and aside from our this very baseline identity, we also have very different artistic sensibilities as well, and different areas of knowledge. So it's really, which kind of don't, you know, that kind of go beyond. It's not, you know, me just watching lesbian films because I'm a lesbian programmer. We kind of all watch different films because they may be, you know, within our kind of more regional areas of knowledge, in terms of regions that we're more attuned to, or you know, or kind of cultural, all cultures that we have more knowledge about, or that we have more of a personal relationship with. So because we all have these different things about ourselves, we're able to always be in dialogue, and always kind of having our expertise, but also kind of being able to trade cards, so to speak. So I think it makes for quite an easy and pleasant programming process, because, you know, there's never kind of tense meetings where, you know, there's um uh, tensions over a film. It feels quite democratic, and it feels quite pardon, it feels quite friendly, and really a moment of kind of sharing knowledge, sharing opinions, sharing, you know, sensibilities, is quite a joyful program process, which I think is not that common, I think. So it's I think we're quite lucky in in the kind of synergy that the team has kind of built.
I really love your point about uh not just identities being your actual identity, but also the knowledge you have. I feel like in queer film festivals, and also just in queer film, we can get so wrapped up in who and what we are, that we forget that actually sometimes what you bring is more than your identity, but also the knowledge that you have from that identity. That's a really lovely point.
Yeah, no, it's and I think it's such an important thing, because it's and it's that kind of way of working together, and kind of just gelling with each other, that I think is so important, to kind of get a program that is not, it's not just, you know, several lanes that don't intersect with each other. It's there's a real melange of themes, of sexualities, of identities, and that's, I think you can only achieve that if there's that, you know, that kind of flexibility and movement and fluidity in terms of what we have in terms of experience, of knowledge. I think that is, and then, you know, obviously the fact that we kind of all get along nicely is also helpful. Um, is Yeah, I think that's a real key to kind of our program process and our programming decisions.
As you previously mentioned, there's so many different areas these films are coming from, so many identities they're about, so many different types of stories. I'm always captivated by film festivals noticing maybe patterns from each year. I remember in COVID, there are a lot of films about isolation and loneliness and technology. Have you noticed anything particularly this year?
I mean, aside from the kind of more obvious one, which is religion, when you think about, you know, religion, and kind of the relationship between religion and queerness, and identity and desire, and queer desire, and we have this, apart from Hunky Jesus, we have one of what I think, what for me personally is one of the great gems of the festival this year, which is a film called Impure Nuns. Um, it's a 1950s lesbian romance between two nuns in a kind of boarding school. And it's quite an incredible film. It's also it's screening on a Sunday, fittingly on a Sunday matinee. Um, um, and yeah, and aside from that, there's also we also have a shorts program that, because we noticed quite a lot uh, of shorts that kind of touched on that and touched on the relationship between faith, identity, queer identity, desire, and crisis of faith, and kind of how that correlate, how your faith or your religion or the religious background that you may come from kind of correlates with your desire, your queerness, or your identity. So yeah, I would say that the religion and the the relationship between religion and queerness and LGBTQIA plus identity is quite a big one. Then we also have quite a few films that touch on kind of the legal hurdles that still affect people, not only in countries where homosexuality is and trans identity are still outlawed, but also in European countries where you think, oh, this is all great, but then all of the kind of the legal hurdles. We have films like Love Letters, which uh, it tells the story of a couple that have got are conceiving via IVF, but then all of the kind of the navigating the processes so they can actually both be parents to the child, and both so that the parent that's not that's not given birth can have needs to adopt their own child. And we have Julian around the kind of the struggles that a couple still finds in terms of getting of marriage equality. And then also films that kind of touch on We Have to Dance to Resist, that kind of touches on also legal hurdles. And then films like Uchronia and Outlaws, that kind of also trace the history of of rights and of how colonial. A film like Outlaws, where the kind of colonial laws and well colonialism still, the kind of the awful laws that took place during that are still felt today in certain countries. And the kind of trade does that history. Chronia also does some of touches on kind of similar themes. um and then we have also some films that kind of touch on more mature love, apart from because obviously we have a breadth, as I think is almost a sub section of queer cinema is coming of age. queer cinema. Aside from, obviously, we have quite a few films that touch on this, but then we have, on the flip side of that, we have films like Mas Palomas or Montreal, My Beautiful, that kind of touch on more mature love, and Mas Palomas, elder desire and elder queer desire. So yeah, so there are quite a few themes that kind of have been popping up this year.
Since last Flare, if I understand correctly, Flare kind of originally appeared in the 80s as kind of a response to Section 28. Since last Flare, there's been a bunch of issues for particularly queer rights, but also just politically with the rise of right wing, challenges to immigrants, challenges particularly to trans people. I wondered how much this impacts your programming decisions from year to year. Is that something you're actively considering as you're programming? How it kind of stands politically with the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, again, in films like Outlaws or films like Tans Across the Borders, that's in Asia, but the kind of the film takes place and the focus of the film are people in kind of Southeast Asia. But we are always kind of very conscious of the kind of the political spectrum, and we both tried that our program celebrates and has a positive and is a safe haven. We have a shorts program that my colleague Zorian programmed, called Heavenly Havens. So it's about like safe spaces for the community, because when we try to think about the how the world are, and program and make sure that our program not only um it faces the issues that are troubling and that are affecting our community, but also that provides still always, and that's something that I think Flare always is and will be, is a haven for celebration of of the community, and that is something that is always in our forefront, and in the balance of celebrating, but never becoming lenient, or never forgetting about the liberties, and Hunky Jesus also touches on this, and kind of on the liberties that are being wanting to be taken away from us. Yeah.
Is it challenging balancing more celebratory narratives with the darker confrontational ones?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And then it's also kind of going back to that, where I was talking to you about strands. It's also interesting because we don't want people to be like, okay, if I want to go and be depressed, I will just go watch all of the films, or not be depressed, but if I want to go and just have a very sobering day, I'll just go and watch films in the mind's strand. Or if I want to kind of feel joyful, I'll go watch heartwarming stuff, or more joyful things in the heart strand. So we try to strike a balance in all of the strands, in all of and that is the kind of the real push pull, and kind of the balancing act of the festival, and that we as the program team kind of face, and yeah, especially this year we've kind of, it's been a challenge, but I think we've managed to arrive at a nicely balanced one.
Now, more on the kind of formal side of filmmaking and the stylistic side. As a programmer, have you noticed any formal shifts in the queer cinematic landscape? Any particular aesthetics that people are drawn to, or any particular developments?
That's a great question. Um, well, I think there's been definitely more of a play with form, and more of a, you know, I've noticed kind of getting, using, thinking of kind of classic. I've noticed kind of not but subverting certain kind of canons. And I'm thinking of saying this. I'm thinking of a film that we have in the program that I think is fabulous film, called Death and Life Madalena, where it's basically a kind of 8.5 state of things kind of film about the kind of the chaos of filmmaking. But it flips something like something that I think is a very problematic trope. It was a very problematic trope of cis actors playing trans characters. And so it's a film where the narrative of the film is completely, there's no queerness in the kind of the narrative aspects of the film at face value, but then the main character is a pregnant woman who's played by a trans character, and I think it's like a delicious spin, and I think we've seen kind of films that kind of play on that, and I think that is quite an interesting thing, how much we've come along, that we now can kind of flip the script and revisit kind of hallowed genres, or kind of things that are in the kind of the canon of filmmaking, and then flip it and make it our own, which I think is quite something, and kind of claiming that to our community is quite empowering.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I guess it's satisfying watching queer cinema open up and have now the room and support to be able to question those narratives.
Yeah.
Um, a few more questions. How do you approach ensuring intersectional queer representation when you've got so many different stories happening at the same time? How do you ensure that race is properly represented, class is represented, and identity besides queer identity, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about, you know, even thinking back to the to our opening night film, it's quite important to us that, you know, it's the film takes it's a South African film, and again, talking about what I was saying in terms of a Death and Life Madalena. It kind of it's a kind of a love letter to uh, Black girlhood and queer Black girlhood. So it's quite important to us that, you know, that all of these, all aside from being part of the community, we are kind of centering not non-white stories as well. You know, when we think of something um like Ife, you know, that's from Nigeria, or something, you know, even if a French film like The Little Sister, where it's someone who's queer but in a Muslim community. It's We try as much as we can to kind of have those stories centered, beyond, you know, not beyond just being characters in the community. I think that is quite an important thing to kind of celebrate that. And then even thinking back to the films that we have from the archive, a title that we have in the archive that's quite important to us is called Louis Chéri, and it's a film from Côte d'Ivoire, that is about gay and trans people in Côte d'Ivoire. So it's we try as much as we can, again, aside from nationality, to have all races represented, all of those life experiences. So thinking about a film like Tens Across the Borders, where that is about performers, ballroom performers in ballrooms, in the ballroom scene in um, Southeast Asia. It was quite important to showcase these stories and these people that, you know, for whom their existence is put into question by government. So, and those films are extremely important for us to be represented in the program. Same thing for Outlaws. It's always very important to us that all cultures and all races and all um, backgrounds are represented. That is at the core, and that is something that really informs our decisions when we're in terms of, you know, not to kind of, we don't get, you know, bogged down by numbers, but we do take this into account as we kind of stack, as films kind of stack up in our program, where we think about, okay, where what are we missing in terms of representation in this in the program, what, and then even thinking about the relationship between shorts and features. It's happened before. We have certain programs that are specific about, you know, certain areas of the globe, because, you know, and there might be the case of, oh, we've not had much representation from these areas of the globe, from in terms of our feature program. So maybe that we've had quite a strong offering in terms of short films from that area, so we might kind of highlight those areas, those areas of the globe in with our shorts programs. So yeah, we try as much as we can to keep that balance and keep that intersectionality in the program.
It's incredible to have a UK festival that forward thinking and that careful in their programming. Now, finally, just before I let you go, what advice would you give to any filmmakers who are eager to play or be selected by Flare?
My advice would be, you know, make a film, and really just um make something that's true and submit it, because it's really we're eager beavers, in terms of viewing, and just I think it's quite and we've in terms of we have films that are very low budget, that are made by a group of two people that just gotten together and kind of made a film. We have bigger films, so I think it's really think of the stories that you have to tell, and think of the stories that are relevant to you and are relevant to the people around you, and make it and send it over, because it's free to submit, and we really love watching the films that we receive. It's quite an enriching experience, watching everything. It's always a very happy winters, kind of viewing films over over the kind of um winter, autumn and winter. So I think, yeah, tell a story that is relevant to you, to your experience, and um and send it over.
Thank you for such an insightful interview, and thank you for joining us. We really look forward to covering the festival and hope to see you there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.